Hi, everybody. Left in the room now for the final session of this summit. My name is Josh Posada. I'm a senior policy reporter at Politico, and I get to write about space, which is what we'll be talking about over the next half an hour or so. Clearly, this is quite an opportune time to do this because of the debate around the IRIS² constellation that the European Commission is trying to get built. Also, debates around the defense of space-based assets. So to discuss these issues and much more, I want to present my two speakers that are going to come onto the stage right now. You've got Rodrigo da Costa. He's the Executive Director of the EU Agency for the Space Programme. And last but not least, Konstantinos Marselos. He's the Chair of Beric and the President of the Hellenic Telecommunications and Post Commission. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So let's start with you, Rodrigo. How's it going at USPA these days? You have a lot of work to do on administering the Galileo and, in the future, the IRIS² program. What's the state of play?
In general, let me say we are doing quite well. We are doing very well. As you may know, the mission of our agency changed quite significantly 2 years ago, back in 2021, with the new EU space program. Before, we had been already deeply involved in navigation activities, so with Galileo and EGNOS. Since then, we have gathered new competencies, new activities. We are taking care of the uptake of Copernicus by commercial users. We are working also on GovSatcom, and I think we'll touch that in a moment. So the agency is expanding. We're doing quite well. We work on our 3 key pillars in the space program. We do exploitation, so we operate, we provide services. We are doing as well security, also a very key topic, securing the assets, but also enabling the utilization of the space assets for security-related missions, and then, of course, everything that is related to the market uptake. In general, quite a lot, but a very good mission to be done.
And you will, in the future, also be working very closely on IRIS². What's the state of play in terms of the preparedness of the agency to deal with that?
Certainly, we are getting ready to contribute to IRIS² also from our side. Maybe 2 things on that. The first thing is, from our perspective, if we look at what is set in the regulation as key tasks for the agency on IRIS, by the way, which is, like many of the projects we do in EU space, a collaboration project. We collaborate with the Commission, we collaborate with the European Space Agency, we collaborate with industry and many different actors. So if you look at the key activities for the agency in the future of IRIS, they are related to the provision of governmental services, they are related to the security of the system and of the services, and they are related as well to making sure that there is a market uptake for that. So we are getting ready. Certainly, we can take a lot from the background and experience that we have built, deploying many of these things for Galileo and EGNOS, and now also for Copernicus, so certainly getting ready. In addition to that, one of the key elements that will be a very important step towards IRIS² is GovSatcom. And we are working deeply in GovSatcom on many dimensions.
And Konstantinos, if you could just present briefly what exactly Beric is, because it's quite an important organization that brings together the interests of a lot of regulators.
Yeah, well, thank you first of all, thank you for having me here as a speaker in Competitive Europe Summit. Well, Beric is the body of European regulators of electronic communications, so the membership comprises the national regulatory authorities for electronic communications of the 27 EU member states, plus some members without voting rights. Well, our strategy, the strategic objectives of Beric is first to support full connectivity for the European Union, also to support open and sustainable digital markets, and third, to empower end users, so end users protection. Beric started focusing, when Beric started, the focus was on electronic communication networks and services, and mainly network infrastructure regulation. But what we see is a trend towards shifting from electronic communications to more general digital subjects, so digital regulation. So we are involved also in Digital Services Act, for example, the enforcement of the Digital Services Act in European Union member states. Beric, as a body, is involved in the Digital Markets Act enforcement, one of the members of the high-level group, advisory group of the Commission. So now we see a trend from traditional electronic communications to digital issues in general.
And what's your interest in communications from space-based assets in low Earth orbit?
Well, we all know that the European Union has defined some very ambitious ICT objectives towards 2030 in the context of the Digital Decade Policy Program. So objectives related to the digital transformation of public sector, but also of enterprises, the development of digital skills of European citizens, and also the deployment and the development of infrastructure, computing infrastructure, but also connectivity infrastructure. And with regards to connectivity, European Union has set some indeed very ambitious objectives. 1 gigabit per second connectivity for all users in Europe by 2030 and coverage of 100% of European population, all populated areas in Europe, with wireless technology at least equivalent to 5G by 2030. These connectivity objectives are technology independent, are technology neutral. And this is an important point because, in my opinion, the most cost-efficient solution to achieve these connectivity objectives might be a hybrid solution combining different technologies. Of course, we understand that fiber networks bring several advantages with regards to speed, to scalability, to energy dissipation as well. We should not forget our environmental objectives. But fiber networks are very expensive to deploy, especially with regards to civil engineering costs. So in the future, I would see a combination of different connectivity technologies like fiber, for densely populated areas where the investment makes sense, but also technologies like fixed wireless access and satellites to cover areas not very populated where fiber investments would not be possible.
And clearly, exactly, cutting out those black spots is what IRIS Squared intends to do. Could we just call it IRIS? Do you guys internally call it IRIS Squared every time?
We do call it IRIS Squared every time, yes. Right. Sorry for that.
See how long that persists. But then, Rodrigo, can you just talk a little bit about the efforts that are ongoing to commercialize the EU satellite programs? Because a lot is being paid for, and a lot is obviously working out in terms of Galileo's practical use as a European alternative to GPS. IRIS Squared offers plenty of solutions in the future, potentially. But how do we better commercialize those so that more people use them or more revenue is generated?
I think that's really a very important point. It's a key topic. When we talk about space and the investments of the Union in space, they are rather significant. You have the EU Space Program with around about 15 billion euro for this financial perspective. Then you have on top the investment that is being done on IRIS. So for us, it's crucial also to demonstrate and to execute, let's say, those investments and transform them into real benefits. And I think in Europe, we are already quite a long way ahead on that. From our side, we are working with some of the tools we have available through Horizon Europe, through program funding, in order to help companies, large companies, small companies, user companies, startups, innovators, but also academia to develop the applications and to develop the tools that allow the use of space data, space services. And this can be, for example, signals from Galileo that give you a precise position. I mean, I'm not very well versed in Brussels because we are an agency based in Prague. To make sure that I would be here on time, I did use my app, my Maps app, to navigate seamlessly here, and that's not possible without satellite data. But also to use Copernicus more and more, building upon commercial applications of Copernicus. Today, Copernicus is widely, extensively used in the institutional domain, but I think there is more to be done in the commercial domain as well. So how companies, startups, entrepreneurs, SMEs, large companies can use that data that is freely available in order to accelerate their businesses. And the impact is very wide. I mean, we publish every second year, more or less, what we call a market report, where we look at different domains of our economy, of our society, where space adds a value. And it is really very diverse. I mean, we have certainly the transport domain with car transport, train, aircraft, maritime, but we have as well domains like energy management, like banking and finance, agriculture, forestry, etc., etc. And on all these domains, one way or the other, space is present. So this tells you also about not only the importance, but also the criticality of space data and space services. Maybe focusing for a moment on the initial element of your question is that indeed we are enlarging our mandate right now to take care as well on satellite communication, so the satellite telecom domain. And we have done a very interesting work with many actors from the member states and with the European Commission to collect the user requirements for secure communications in Europe. And this laid some of the foundations in terms of user needs, user requirements for GovSatcom, for IRIS, so preparing a lot of the policy documents that then are the basis for the work that is already ongoing and that will be ongoing in the future. We are also, a bit later this year, in the second half of the year, we will publish a dedicated market report. So for those of you interested, stay tuned. All our reports are freely available. So there we will look at SATCOM utilization in Europe and also potential for growth. And this will help, hopefully, not only the policymakers to target investments, but will also help private businesses to see where business opportunities are.
Yeah. Okay, clear. And you talked halfway through your answer there, Rodrigo, about the importance and critical nature of satellite infrastructure. I think this has been a theme of the conversations here today, is about the defense aspect. So we have to talk about that. We've talked a little bit in the backstage room about spectrum monitoring, things like that. Konstantinos, to what extent is this a pressing issue for your members and regulators to monitor potential threats and jamming, spoofing satellite infrastructure?
Well, spectrum monitoring is indeed a part of our mandate. So most of Beric members have also spectrum mandate at national level, and spectrum monitoring is a very important task. And
can you just explain what it means, actually?
I mean, it's the right use of spectrum as a scarce resource at national level, making sure that it is used according to the licensing processes and that no issues like interference are caused to different sectors and stuff like this. And we need appropriate equipment to do this. So for example, when it comes to satellite spectrum monitoring, we need, of course, to safeguard spectrum and our infrastructure from wrong use and wrong access. And the state of the art, the current state of the art today is to have terrestrial infrastructure to do the satellite spectrum monitoring. Our plans at the ETT is to have a feasibility study. This is a new project we expect to start very soon, and evaluate microsatellites, cube satellites, low Earth orbit satellites as a platform for efficient satellite spectrum monitoring. Of course, to be efficient with regards to spectrum monitoring, but also to be cost efficient. And the reason we want to explore this option is because we feel that microsatellites, cube satellites technologies has made a lot of progress the last years. So you can find a lot of the self components to build a cube satellite. The cost is reasonably low. Also, the launching costs and prices keep going down, so it's not something exotic from the cost perspective. And we believe that this is a very, very interesting option for satellite spectrum monitoring, which is part of our mandate.
Okay, and Rodrigo, how many of your staff in Prague actually deal with this specifically?
I mean, with well, when it comes to the particularity of spectrum monitoring, indeed, it's also key for us. I mean, we have the satellites transmitting data, transmitting signals in many different frequencies. Spectrum monitoring is certainly crucial. And there, of course, we count very much on the work that is done by the national regulators and the national authorities in order to monitor the spectrum. There are also ways to interface. I mean, all this is well framed. This is one of the elements of ensuring a secure operation of the systems. It's not the only one. Security, of course, security of the assets is a broader domain. Spectrum security, cyber security of the assets, even the physical security, making sure that everything is protected. When I look at security as one of our three key pillars of activity, certainly security is embedded in the organization. So it's a little bit like quality. I mean, security is something that you do by design and you do embedded in the organization. Certainly we have specialists in setting the security requirements, which means making sure that whatever we will build is built according to security needs. We have as well people, and we have a team of operators that are continuously monitoring, 24/7, continuously monitoring the security of our space assets, in particular, in this case, very much focused today on Galileo, making sure that there are no interferences, that there are no attempts to disrupt the system.
And how much can you interpret from situational awareness from the satellite itself? Are you reliant on signals on the ground stations, or can you see what they see?
It's an excellent question, and it brings also to an activity that we will start very soon. From the 1st of July, we will become the front desk for space surveillance and tracking. So there is an EU consortium composed by a number of member states that is actually monitoring the space around us, looking at things such as potential collision between satellites, re-entry of old satellites, etc. And this front desk is there to interface with the users. From our DNA as a service provider, we will become on the 1st of July those that make that interface with the users. Today, the majority of the data that is collected is indeed based on one hand on catalogs, on data that is declared, but also based on ground observations through different telescopes and monitoring capabilities. Certainly, as we will look forward, I think the element of in-space monitoring has potential for growth. We see many private companies starting to offer this type of capability, so we'll see how the market will develop. But as I mentioned, I mean, if we want to make sure that our systems are secured, spectrum security is key, cyber security is key, but also the security of the space around us.
But do you think we take this seriously enough yet?
More and more, I would say. More and more. I think generally there is an ongoing and growing understanding of the link between space and defense. And this is true not only from the specialists or the people dealing with space every day, like myself, but also a key political decision makers. Look, for example, at the joint communication that was published a couple of months ago between the European Commission and the External Action Service on the EU space strategy for security and defense. That piece of document is crucial. It comes from, of course, the strategic compass and further elaborates the link between space security and space and the security and defense domains, and highlights a couple of very, very important areas where in Europe certainly we are already working, but where we need to work more, because it's fundamental on two different aspects. It's fundamental first because space is so important in our daily life that we need to secure the assets, the capabilities to make sure we can continue navigate and we can continue getting our weather forecasts, etc. But also, more and more the security forces, civil forces, defense forces around the European Union are counting and want to count on space-based services and space-based information in order to execute their sovereign activities.
Yeah, and you hear constantly these days more and more words like astropolitics and counterspace capabilities, these kind of things as well. Do you anticipate in the future, obviously you have a very clear mandate as an agency and executive director, but do you anticipate in the future that you will begin to interface more with national militaries, with national governments specifically?
We are already very strong in the interface with the national governments, national security authorities, military or civil security forces, etc., etc. And this is growing right now because we are approaching a very key milestone on Galileo, which is the initial operational capability of the public regulated service, which is a service that is specifically directed and specifically secured for those communities. And as we will move forward, and we see, by the way, that on the strategy the strategy paper I've just mentioned, this type of services provided by the EU space program to the security communities will grow. GovSatcom, for example, is very much in this domain. Even the space surveillance and tracking, indeed, the information can be used also for space domain awareness type of activities. And if we look, for example, at Earth observation, why not? Maybe there also as well there is potential for development. So I see this certainly as a growing field.
Yeah. Konstantinos, you talked earlier about the need for a mix in the provision of telecommunication services. How much of that mix is going to be space, would you anticipate?
Well, it's of course it's difficult to give exactly figures on this, but what we see is that more and more innovation comes from the space sector. So there a lot of improvement in traditional geostationary satellite systems, but also in new trends like low Earth orbit satellites. And this is what we follow in Beric. So in 2022, we had a project on evaluating satellite communication systems in the context of universal offer. So the minimum connectivity that should be provided for all the citizens in each member state. And we evaluated satellite communication systems in that direction with regards to prices, with regards to quality of service, the role of satellite operators in the market, the capacity that can be offered, the demand, and also the regulatory implications. And on that side, we identified some key regulatory issues that we need to take always into consideration, like, of course, frequency assignments and the procedures, interference issues, radio equipment licensing and compliance to the relevant regulation, and also how satellite communication systems fit in the context of national telecommunication laws and universal service regulation. This year, the focus of Beric has been on low Earth orbit satellites as a connectivity platform. So we see the trend. Of course, it's very interesting. We see the advantages brought by low Earth orbit satellites, the low latency, and we decided to include an item in our work program 2023 on low Earth orbit satellites. We ran a workshop in April on reliable and secure low Earth orbit satellite systems for connectivity, and it was very successful, a record-breaking participation for Beric workshop in this one. And of course, first objective was to better understand the technology, and second, to focus a little bit more on the direct-to-device use case, the connectivity where you have a smartphone that can be directly connected to the satellite. Mm-hmm. And what are the trends in this direction? The impression is that this technology of low Earth orbit satellites is very promising, has a lot of potential. And this direct-to-device connectivity is also very, very interesting as well. 3GPP has done a lot of work on non-terrestrial networks and how non-terrestrial networks, like space networks, can complement terrestrial networks to cover uncovered areas. And this is indeed very important.
Black spots, basically.
Exactly. And with research making progress, with more innovation coming in different fields like dynamic coverage, antenna array systems, new generation of low Earth orbit constellations, we expect to see more from this technology. At this stage, use cases can be for emergency communications in uncovered areas, or text messaging services, or IoT services. But as the technology progresses, we expect to see voice and data communications in uncovered area supported by low Earth orbit satellites. So I think the potential of space technology to contribute to connectivity objectives is indeed great.
I'm not seeing any questions yet in the app that we have, but of course, if you want to ask a question, please feel invited to register it through here. I'm not sure, do we have mics for questions in the room, Agat? No. Okay, so you have to put it through the Swap Card app if you want to ask a question. Rodrigo, just to talk to you about the future, do you anticipate also that 6G, for example, the future of telecommunications will be far more greatly provided by space-based infrastructure? Is that your assumption?
Yeah, it's a good question, and also maybe reflecting a little bit on what was just said. To mention that also in this domain, by the way, in many domains, the space technology, space data, space services are not there to replace. They are there to enhance, and they are there to leverage. If we look, take another application. For example, let's look for a moment at autonomous driving. Something that is coming, and certainly where space is one of the important elements. Positioning from space played an important element. Accurate maps play an important element. But we are still very far away from the day where a car will drive autonomously, uniquely based on space data and space services. This is complemented by having onboard cameras, by having onboard sensors, proximity sensors, etc. So it is the integration that makes it. Space plays a role, very often a fundamental role you cannot do without, but it does not replace another technology. It enhances and together with other technologies creates the solution. From my point of view, in the telecommunications domain, it's actually quite similar, and it was mentioned. First, space provides the element of coverage. Certainly, there are areas where space can cover. If there are black spots from the terrestrial networks, space can provide that coverage, but also provides an element of resilience. And I think there is a cross resilience between the terrestrial network and the space network to make sure that then the service arrives to whom it should arrive. And by the way, if necessary, also with the necessary level of protection and of security. So in this sense, as you will look forward, you will see more and more an integration of the space-based connectivity with the ground-based connectivity. Yeah. And this also on related technologies. And all technologies that are out there, I think we will see them more and more present as well. When it comes to satellites.
Great. So we have two questions now. One from Benjamin Gioni. Do you have any update on the use of EGNOS and satellites for FRMC? Which is Future Railway Mobile Communication System. So you just mentioned transport. That's a specific question about the provision of satellite technology for the use of transport networks. And then another question from Livou Lazar. Are there any developments on the use of quantum technologies from space, comms, networking, sensing? Can I just first of all ask you about the EGNOS and railway situation, Rodrigo?
Okay, yeah, sure, certainly. So when we look at EGNOS, maybe for clarity, when we look at EGNOS, we are looking also at a navigation system, so precise positioning system. Again, very much used or born for aviation, actually, safety of life type of applications. Today, widely used also in agriculture. With a lot of tractors using EGNOS, and now we are looking in particular to the expansion to two domains. First, the maritime domain. So how can we bring EGNOS to the maritime domain? We are preparing, and we hope that very soon we can bring live a service, EGNOS dedicated service for the maritime community. For sea and inland waterways type of navigation. The second thing we are looking very much in detail is on EGNOS for the railway application. So we are working with the European Railway Agency, with the Europe's rail joint undertaking to bring EGNOS to a number of standards, and in particular related to ERTMS. Here, let me highlight, we have a conference coming very soon, in September, mid of September, together with the Spanish presidency and with my my dear colleagues from ERA and from Europe's Rail, we are organizing a conference in Madrid where we will be talking exactly about that, about how can we bring together space and rail. The program looks quite exciting, and certainly many of you will come and attend.
And the use of quantum technologies just generally, Konstantinos, in a telecommunications industry?
Well, of course, quantum technologies is another trend we see, and it's going to be applied in different sectors like telecoms and space, I believe. So this is for sure one, and also included in the Digital Decade Policy Program objectives as well. So quantum is a technology that we look at, and we see the trend. And if I may go back to reflect a bit on the 6G issue we discussed before. Of course, at this stage, 5G deployment is still in progress, and I believe that we still need to exploit. There are still open opportunities to exploit the potential of 5G technology. But of course, the research on 6G has started. The technology is under development. The standards are under development. But of course, 6G will bring many important use cases: enhanced mobile broadband, ultra-reliable low-latency communication, massive machine-type communications, extending 5G capabilities, and also some new capabilities like AI and sensing integrated to communications. If we want to take advantage of the full potential of 6G, which might be commercially available towards 2030, we need to exploit some built-in features of 6G technology: native AI, native trustworthiness, and the fact that brings together Earth and space communications. So 6G is going to be the technology that will integrate terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. This means that mobile networks and wireless networks will be integrated with, for example, airborne wireless networks implemented through constellations of low Earth orbit satellites. And in this way, coverage of uncovered areas will be achieved, minimum latency communications will be achieved, and extra long-hauling transmissions will be achieved in the most cost-efficient way. And each user everywhere in the Earth will have the opportunity to connect to both types of networks, taking advantage of the special features of each of the network. So 6G is going to be the technology that will strongly integrate terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks.
Perfect. So there is so much more to look forward to in this space over the years ahead. Is my friend and colleague Lauren Serelis in the room? Is he here already? Oh, there he is. Okay, so look, we're not going to delay everybody from their lunch. We're zooming down on time. This is the final session of the conference. We will clearly pick these topics up again at events that Politico holds over the coming months, and certainly this summit again next year. Thank you to the speakers, Konstantinos and Rodrigo, and I'll hand over to Laurens to give some final closing remarks for the summit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Josh. And he kind of gave a teaser there. There's a very appealing lunch buffet just outside that door. But I'm going to ask you to just stick with me for 3 to 4 minutes, no more, because I have the pleasure of walking you through some of the takeaways or the things that we've learned today at the second day of our Competitive Europe Summit. And in good Politico fashion, I'm going to do it in 5 takeaways on today's discussions. 5 things overheard at the Competitive Europe Summit. First, I think the key point here is on the early discussions this morning. On defense, it's clear that Europe is very focused on what's happening in Ukraine and is focused on making sure that Ukraine wins the war that Russia started last year. What is less clear is how exactly it's planning to do that and in supporting Ukraine in doing that. Obviously, the European Union is diving into defense, and that is a relatively new territory for all the plans and ambitions ambitions that it's got. And so it's hitting some limits there, both at the national level and especially at the EU level. And on the NATO side, clearly the alliance has had a transformative year since the war in Ukraine started, but it's also getting back into age-old discussions about spending ceilings or spending floors, as our ambassadors like to call it this morning. So a lot of questions still to go through there. On digital resilience, I heard on a lot of initiatives that the European Commission has put on the books during this mandate. The question now is, how will that translate into what's happening on the ground? So far, there's been no cybersecurity incidents that have put the lights out in Europe at a large scale. But at the same time, there's still a lot of ways that we don't yet know how Europe's legislative framework will pan out and how that will translate into actual cybersecurity with companies and public organizations across the continent. On the third one, I heard a senior Commission official say, "I don't like the word sovereignty." That was very new to me and surprising. But of course, it related to Europe's struggle to get a cybersecurity certification scheme done for the cloud sector, which has been a particular pain point when we look at all of the things that have been moving on cybersecurity. So I do hope that the EU finds its way out of that word sovereignty and into an actual certification scheme sometime soon. Fourthly, this morning I heard the Lithuanian ambassador to NATO question the veracity of the recent events in Russia, specifically the rebellion led by the Wagner Group boss. That was new to me, at least. I think it's interesting to see that an ambassador to NATO explains to us that in war and in conflict, you've got to be careful with what you see and what you believe. And that is something to keep in mind as we walk through the daily news and daily events, also for us as journalists. And fifthly, overall, I think it's clear that both defense and cybersecurity and the broader security field is an area where Europe sees a lot of ambition, sees a lot of opportunity when it comes to its own competitiveness. In part, that's because I feel there's a bit of a way to go and a bit of a catch-up to be had in Europe. But let's see that as an opportunity for the continent's competitiveness. For more takeaways, snap analysis, jokes, we do jokes as well. I referred you to our great coverage on Politico.eu and our pro newsletters, which cover everything from technology, cybersecurity and data, competition, trade. We keep you posted on a daily basis. We keep you informed and we keep you entertained as well. So you get both. I'd like to thank all of our speakers that joined us in the past 2 days here on stage. I feel we had some great panels. We've had some great keynotes. And that was great to see. I hope you feel the same about the level of discussion that we've had. And obviously, I'd like to thank our partners for their support, specifically our leading partners, Google and Santander, and our presenting partners, Cisco, PKEE, and SQM. Obviously, I'd like to thank you all for attending here in the room in Brussels, and also for those joining us online for keeping up with the discussion. And for upcoming summits, I refer you to our website, Politico.eu, specifically the Politico Live page, where you can find all of our events, and we hope to see you again at those events very soon. Let me close and let me open the door to that wonderful lunch sitting outside, and thank you for attending.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.